So it's a little wooden piece. We can see some texture on it. Still really dark. Anyway, there's texture on the wood here, and you rotate around, because if you know how a tree grows, you can see that. You probably should have had some exposure to this in Viscom 2. I know I did it with my students. I'm pretty sure Peter did it with his students. But it doesn't help. Practice is always good. Also, it's a different tool. So I'm going to pick out, this little block here and draw it. I will try and reduce the rotation of the page, only because the setup is difficult, but block. Okay, I'm rotating the page. I changed my mind. And I am going to draw it with these little nubbins right here inside of it. So right there, I was very light with these lines compared to some of the other ones, because I know that these were just construction lines. Whereas this, I think one of the things I talked to people was earlier about sort of fixing it later, and I'll try to remember to fix this later. So one of the things that as I do this is I'm not paying too much attention to the exact proportions that it is in the real thing. What I'm more interested in is just starting to draw it and get some of those details in there. So we have this. And feel free to ask questions at any point in time. One of the things I know is that these ones in the middle are lighter than out here, so I want to be conscious of that. The lighting in here is not that great, so I'm going to make up my own lighting, and in make up my own lighting, I'm going to say the light's coming from the top corner, and just a general light, not a specific spotlight, the general light being like the sun. So I'm going to plot that shadow, which is if the light's coming from that direction, just like that. And then, so at this point here, go up, and just at some general angle, there, 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 connect them. That's how I plot the shadow for that. So it means this is going to be the lightest here on top, second, third, 1, 2, 3. And normally we might make the shadow the darkest. Some people, right, are not going dark enough. And one of the ways that I help myself get darker on the page is by starting with my darkest spot, or trying to make a really dark spot, and then know that I have to bring everything else up to that level. So here, just try and speed it up. Using the side of the pencil to keep it pretty fast. And I know it can get darker than that, so I'm getting more pigment on the paper. It's okay that I'm kind of rough with my lines. So right, there's my guideline right there, and you can see I've gone over it, and even right here I've gone over it, even right here I've gone over it. I'm going to fix that later. This is my darkest side. If I look at this, all the lines are going vertical up and down, pretty straight, but if I look on this side, it looks as though like there's some curvature in the texture. It's not straight. So as I draw this, oh, and I also missed these two little nubbins right here. Before I put them in and I'm doing some construction lines, sometimes I ghost over the existing lines I have to see roughly in between how I can match that. Okay. And one of the things that's going through my head as I do this is this darkness is a little bit of the transition between these two parts, because this is one component and this is a separate component. So this darkness is like the cast shadow of the parting line between them. It's actually not as emphasized here in the real thing. So, but again, I'm taking a little artistic license to overemphasize that here on this one. Now back to this, the lines are going up and down. I'm still just going to use the broad stroke of my pencil here to get some value in there. Little round this edge just a little bit. And start to get some of those strokes in there. So this pen is getting a little dull, but I think it's valuable to have it that way. So I'm going to go and get a new one that is sharper and continue to do these lines. And this last one here has like a little texture to it. It's not just a single line, so I'm going to go in and rough that just a little. That, and then this line right here. And I should follow the exact same that I've been telling some of you, which is to keep your pages clean by putting another page over it. Now I want to do this face right here. I'm thinking this could definitely get darker, actually, as I look at it. So let me go in there. Okay, where am I? Right here, adding some texture. The pattern is pretty not intense, but there's not a clear pattern to it, but I see a big oval here, another one here, and then I'm going to just make up as I go along after that. So I got this big one here, this one there, that. Right. So now I have all those in there, but if I look at this, it's not like one clean line, this big shape right here. So the original one that I drew right here, it's not one clean line. So I'm gonna rough it up just a little bit to match what I think I'm seeing. And then again right here, this really dark spot. And oh, I was using the rough one anyway. All right, so even though I said the light is coming from this direction, I started adding the shading right here and made a gradient over this way, just to add more contrast right here at this corner. And bring out some of the texture where it got darker so I could still see it. And the top has a lot of craziness going on with all the texture that's happening there. So it looks like there's just not enough contrast between the top and the side. So I'm going to make this a little darker. And also now, start on the edges, thick at the bottom, where light's hitting it, just get a little thinner. But I want to sort of get in that corner to define it. And there's my little wooden cube. So, are there any questions about what I just did, why I did something, how I did something, if you didn't sort of see it up there?
Since I'm thinking this case, how do you sort of like distinguish between like like dark color, like dark tinted blue and sort of like a light type one? If it's like we're sitting on the
So right, I didn't have too much of a difference here between the dark wood and the light wood, because I was focusing more on the texture. Alternatively, we could just have a little sketch here. And just to make it much clearer, let's do this, right? And make this the dark one and this the light one. And And if it has roughly the same lighting scenario, then this is going to be the darkest side, but the darkest side of this light one. So if it's white, then I'll go to 50% gray for the shadow side. So let me try and roughly get that at 50%. And it'll be something like 25% for that side. And now this one is already like at a 70%. So if it was the dark side, it would be almost 90 or something. But we don't see the darkest side. But we do see this side right here, and it would be roughly 80. So I mean, there's not that much of a range, but within I could still have, since I'm not doing it exactly with markers, I can still make this much darker. So in this instance, in this little one here, right, I focused on the value. There's no texture there at all. And I can go back later on after the fact and add some texture in there. And let's see if we have one, a cube that is pretty straight on the sides and has like these curves at the top. I mean, again, I think we can't really see too much up there with the lighting the way it is, but if it's pretty straight on the side, and even this side is also pretty straight, and I'll just go, I'm pressing harder now to make a darker line so you can still see the texture, and then curve at the top, dark, light. Oh, sorry. When I say dark light, I'm saying like hard pressure, less pressure, hard pressure, less pressure, hard pressure, less pressure. And it's a little messy in terms of you can't clearly see it. So let me clean it up. Let me fix it afterwards, right? Right, so in this instance, I focused on the value first and then I focused on the texture. This first one, I was still wrapped up with the texture, then I'm just trying to bring the value in there. And it would be very hard, I think, to do all of it at once immediately. So I focus on one or the other, and then I bring them together. My practice with doing the texture on this one made it when I got here, that was easier. Hey, I roughly know how texture is going to work, and I have an idea of what I'm going to do when I add it in there later on. And again, a specific thing like adding the value in there, and then when I'm adding the texture on top, you know, I know I'm pressing harder here in this first section, and ever so lighter right here. I don't think it shows up too well on the screen, but these two are much lighter than this one. And again, this right here, I press it much darker. So you can see this in person after this is done. But trust me, it's darker right here and lighter right here. There's still some space, you know, I think right in here to add just a little more contrast now because I just don't see enough. And that slight goes against my original thing in terms of saying, hey, this is roughly going to get to 50% gray. But in terms of making an object that reads so you can see it, take that license and make that little change. You know, one last thing, not last thing, but an alternative way is that the texture itself could start to be some of that darkness. I'm not really seeing anything here that I can like clearly do that, so let's just make it up. Also, I just realized I hate this cube, so I'm not even going to use it. It's a nice little sketch on there. Maybe later on we'll figure out something to do with it, but Also, just when I do this little sketch for the people who I said, hey, let's have some intentional lines, right? I'm clearly going from A to B, and then I have this little dot right here. Just confident lines, right? This one, ever so slightly, was not on the mark. I could try and get it right, but it doesn't really matter because it's in the back. I'm drawing through. I might not even need that line. I have it there just in case I do, if I want to add something to it. But right now, I don't need it, and there's no point in adding more value there so that it's hard to see. Sorry, they're adding more value there so the mistake comes to the forefront. What was I talking about? I was talking about using texture to add value. Keeping with the same lining scenario that we have up here, I could and I actually end up just sort of shading over it anyway. I thought I could use it, but it's really hard to use this texture to make it darker and not become like a different texture altogether. But in that instance, right, I started with the texture first and then add value on it, on top of it. I would start to pick the angle of the pencil up on that one. So instead of getting like a smooth stroke like this, I started getting like almost lines. And I really don't like that. So it's a reminder to put my pencil down as flat as I can to get a smooth gradient out of it. Other questions, again, about what I did, how I did it? Okay. So you'll have time. There's a bunch of cubes here for you to practice and play with afterwards. Always sign your work, date your work. What is today? The 20th or the 19th? 19. Thank you all. Except for whoever said 20. Signed and dated.